And I knew we were going to have Jon on.
Oh, nice.
It's got to be Lakers or Dodgers something. And I was actually going to open by congratulating Titletown 2020, Los Angeles, California. I was ahead of you, my gorgeous friend. I was ahead of you. I was going to come on and congratulate. I was probably going to lead with the Dodgers because I maybe feel even better for their fan base. But hey, I mean, you know, it's like we're a Celtics fan, but it's not as though we're totally unrepresented in the office with
Respect. Hey, yeah, I've given it your way too. That front line of Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, and Larry Bird gave me nightmares as a young lad growing up. How are we going to stop it? Bob McAdoo helped out. He was able to spread the floor a little bit, but we just didn't have answers, man. Those were some days, Jon Anik, the 80s rivalry of the Celtics and Lakers, and hopefully we can get back to that. Now we're even on world titles. So, we'll see what 2021 has in store for us. But how about those Atlanta Hawks? I don't know if you guys saw what they did.
I'm telling you. Even before this latest move, I found myself looking at that Eastern Conference price on Atlanta because stranger things have happened. You know what I mean? In terms of a team emerging seemingly out of nowhere. And I think Trae Young is such a wild card in terms of his ability to take over games that if you get the right surrounding pieces, Rondo and everybody else, and you get a couple injuries to some of the big dogs in the East, you just never know. So I got one eye on the Atlanta Hawks for sure.
Yeah, Gallinari joined them, and then the cat from Sacramento, they didn't match his offer this morning. I was looking at it going, whoa, okay, because we're going to be starting up next month, and it'll be interesting to see, man. The NBA playoffs was pretty special to me. That bubble they had, for them to pull it off was amazing. But, of course, I'm a Lakers fan, so I don't know how other people would feel about how the season went out, but I love it.
I certainly don't think for the Lakers or the Dodgers there's any asterisk. I think if you look at the NFL season, right, it hasn't been ideal. And even if you look at the Raiders, I know they played well against the Chiefs and they got a lot of guys back, but certain teams have had to deal with certain things during this NFL season that has made it so much less than ideal that they really shouldn't be playing that ensuing weekend. So the NFL season feels a little muddied to me, if I'm being honest. And if you want to say, oh, it's because Tom Brady's gone, then you're not really paying attention. But for the Dodgers and for the Lakers, those were legitimate sports seasons and everybody had conditions. And was Avery Bradley the guy who opted out? You got to feel for that guy a little bit, huh?
Yeah, he did. Look, to be fair, I think it was a family member, a young daughter had a certain condition, and you just weigh the two. So understandably, I think full support from his teammates. But yeah, I got to imagine there was still a time when – because look, this thing unfolded over months where the early data that was coming in regarding the pandemic was like eye-popping. And then as we went through, we realized, okay, if we do, certain things – around, create a certain bubble around a team or around a household. Maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. But by then, obviously he had made his decision. But I wondered if he had thought about it a second time once he realized, wait a minute, not only are they safe, the families are coming to them. And how about the fact that there wasn't even one infection in that bubble for 3 months? Right.
And I know we all love MMA goes, but how about David Price? That it just can't feel good when for whatever reason, right? Like Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung obviously opted out preseason for the Patriots, and we've seen the way things have unfolded. But I don't know. I got to think you're jonesing to get back in there if you're David Price sitting home making that money or not making that money, I guess in his case, but seeing the Dodgers realize a championship for the first time in 30 plus years, to not be a part of it, but to be on the team, that's got to be weird.
I am so upset right now.
What's up?
Jon is so professional and so nice, and I had so many burns just in my pocket waiting to throw at him, and he just kind of he B-rabbited me.
When we met, right? When we met, maybe there would have been more of me that wouldn't be happy for the Dodgers or Andy Reid and the Chiefs, but I just think I'm old now, bro. And I like to see people happy, and Josh Gross and all these starved Dodgers fans, I can't help but be happy for those people. And I don't know, having kids has softened me goes. We met, I had 0 children. I have 3 now.
I'm still waiting for that day when it's just us and he goes, hey, this is on. And he just gets in your face and he's throwing beers and popcorn at you or something. But
Get
yeah,
me drinking goes. Get me drinking. The Boston will come out, I assure you.
like George said, I grew up in the 80s and that was a great time. But at no time, for as much as we despised the Celtics, we had a respect for them because, I mean, they changed the game. They forced you to play at your best every game. And Larry Bird was just such a team player, and McHale and Parrish, none of them guys had egos. They were the consummate team.
Right. Well, and you guys know of my love for Kobe, and I'm glad they were able to bring it home the year in which we lost him. I still think, for me, when I think about 2020, I don't immediately think about COVID-19. I think about where I was that fateful day in January when I, at least for 2 hours, didn't feel like I wanted to go on after that Kobe news hit, just not Kobe, I think that's still just very raw with a lot of people. I mean, I only met him once and shook his hand, and I'll forever cherish the 180 seconds I had with him. But for people who had a lot more time with him and know how special he was and how much of a Renaissance man he was, it's still very raw.
Yeah. And this morning, I don't know if you heard the news, but we lost Diego Maradona, a huge star.
I saw that. Yeah.
Dude, arguably one of the biggest figures in all of Argentina history. Like, obviously they've had their contributions in many ways. I'm sure they've had, composers and other singers and politicians. I can't think of many. What is it? Eva Perón, I believe, but I'm just saying that's how mythical Maradona is. I was lucky enough to go to Buenos Aires one year, and you can't drive more than a kilometer, because that's what they use over there, without seeing something that has to do with the national team and especially Diego Maradona.
Right. And man, did you see your guy just nail Buenos Aires or whatever? Said it better than I could.
Yeah.
Oh. Hey, by the way, John, did you allude to, or were you at home thinking about Brendan Fitzgerald saying that Polish kid's name? Did you see how he squeezed it in 10 times before the first round was over? He was showing it off. God, who was that guy? I should have prepped like Jon Anik, but it was on one of the last Dana White Contender Series. You guys know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, and the name's escaping me right now. But so I was the one who had that name first surface on my radar because if you recall, the week prior, Brendan wasn't feeling good, so I filled in on Dana White's Contender Series, and we were promoting the next week ahead. And I looked at that name and then heard that audio file, and singularly, I think it's the hardest name that we've had to pronounce. Some of these names are a little bit open to interpretation, but a lot of the Polish names and European names, a lot of people in those countries don't believe that Americans are even capable of saying those words, right? And I think there is some truth to that. We have sort of mastered Jacek, whatever you want to say, but I tried to wish Antonina Shevchenko happy birthday in Russian, and the American mouth just doesn't want to make those sounds. So, it's our devil that we know, but as you guys know, not a show goes by that we're not dealing with a name that is pretty damn challenging. Practice doesn't make perfect, but I always tell Buff, if you say it 50 or 100 times, you got a better chance of nailing it than if you say it twice before you show up.
Yeah, shout out to Brendan, man. He not only did he rock it, but I noticed he was going a little. I was like, okay, you're going a little overboard. You nailed it. We get it. But he literally said it a few times. He even forced Bisping to say it, and I think Bisping got it right. But anyway.
Yeah, it's Kashonshkiewicz. Now it came to me. Yes. Kashonshkiewicz. So it's very natural for us to have the double SH sound in there.
Mm-hmm.
Kashonshkiewicz. But you can tell I literally said it 200 times. So it becomes Kashon. See, still screwed it up. Kashonshkiewicz. God damn.
You didn't say Justin James 200 times.
There we go. Got to practice that one.
We had him on after we had you. Remember we had you on. We busted your chops about that. We had him on, and he was giggling along too. He caught it.
Well, it's so funny too, and I think my saving grace with him was that he knew how excited I was for him, given the circumstance of him getting that short notice UFC debut. And we tracked him down with our producers and called him and talked to him a few days before. And so I think part of my error was just that I was so excited for the guy to have that debut and then to have that moment. But yeah, we'll try to do better the next time.
And we all were Jesse James at one point growing up,
That's
whether
right.
we
That's right.
or playing on cops or not cops and robbers, but Indians and Cowboys with your friends. So yeah, that's a slip up that no one has a problem with. All right. We got to go over a few things here. I blew the whole intro because as Ratner was exiting, you were coming in. But I wanted to tell everybody, wow, that's great. Today's show, we get a future Hall of Famer in the UFC. A Hall of Famer in Mark Ratner because he's a member of 4 Hall of Fames in the combat sports world. And I was going to introduce you as a future Hall of Famer, Jon Anik. I'm telling you, man, you're going to get there. I still have tons of admiration for when you arrive to what you've become.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, we go way back, the 3 of us, obviously, and I'm not sure when I first graced the MMA Junkie Radio airwaves, but I know you guys would never put me over just for the sake of doing it because we were friends and go way back. So not that I've had to earn your respect on the microphone, but I do believe that there have been times, especially Go's always asking me those hard-hitting questions, but no, I feel like I have earned your respect, and it means a great deal to me because, I hold you in the highest regard. So I appreciate that. I'm not going to hold out hope or wait for that Hall of Fame jacket. It's crazy, though, to think about all the accrual of the years and the shows now at this point. I tweeted that I had to fill in for Goldie at UFC 155, and then I took over full-time doing pay-per-views. I think it was UFC 208. So the next show will be my 50th pay-per-view, and man, time is just ripping off the clock, but just trying to earn this seat every show out, not unlike a lot of people out there. And, thankfully we've been able to work when a lot of play-by-play guys are idle right now.
Jon, I saw that article, something about your contract. Was that just a comment that flew out basically because you were trying to show everybody the passion you have for your job and how you want to earn your seat? Or is that really the way the contract's structured? Because if it is, enough already. Stop. You earned it. Get yourself one of those secure NBA contracts. That way, in case you fly off a skateboard or something, you're still getting paid, my man. Like I said, you put in the work. You've done it. Give your family that security.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, it's not guaranteed, and that clause is real. I wouldn't have just trotted that out there. I do think it's a good way to approach things, whether your boss is someone who is hard-nosed like UFC President Dana White or not. I think trying to earn your contract when you go to work is kind of a good way to make sure that not only you earn it, but you get a raise in the next one. But again, I think if Dana White was unhappy with the live event broadcast team, he would move quickly to put in another team. So, I believe at this point that I have earned his trust. Sometimes, unfortunately, the only time that you really know where you stand is when you do get that new contract. But I got a little bit less than 2 years left. And what I'm really trying to do for my family is go earn another contract and put myself in a position to continue to have the job in the sport that makes me happy. Because as you guys know, I would love to do NFL play-by-play, and perhaps that opportunity will come. But I do have my dream job right now and want to do everything in my power to preserve it and make sure it continues.
I think you could do both. NFL play-by-play and the pay-per-views or fight nights the night before.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I mean, doing a game here or there would certainly appeal to me. It was harder to do like what I did in 2015 to step out of the UFC world and go do a college football game because I don't follow college football. But to do the NFL the way I follow it with 3 fantasy teams and doing the super contests and survivor pools and picking every game against the spread, I'm so immersed in the NFL world that to step in on 2 days' notice would not frighten me in the least. So we'll see, man. We'll see. Hopefully.
You know that you've been watching college football 2 times a year for the past 20 years. You guys got to play the Jets every year, right?
That's right. That's right. Here's hoping they go 0-16. If Frank Gore were not on the team, I would be begging for them to go 0-16. But for that guy's sake, I wouldn't mind them going 1-15. But Adam Gase is a fraud. It's amazing. And I don't know if he's sober or not. I hate to make that allegation. Not like I'm always sober sitting around. But Adam Gase, to have gotten another job within that division, that's the singular worst contract coach or player handed out in the NFL in the last 10 years. So what an embarrassing organization to hand Adam Gase that contract and that money. And, you can be sure I'm waiting on my ticket for him to be the next coach fired. It never seems to cash. But Yeah, you guys like my Cam Newton love here today, by the way? You like that?
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the stud athletes from the Patriots in the late 70s when I was growing up, early 80s was John Hara, I believe. He was a guard.
John Hanna?
John Hanna, excuse me. And when I see the old Patriot logo, it reminds me of that. And Grogan, I believe, Steve Grogan was a
Steve Grogan, number 14 in your program, number 1 in your hat, right?
Yeah. Steve Grogan had this long ass neck. I remember, as a kid,
Yeah.
whatever. Then we had a guy named Merton Hanks with the 49ers who also had a.
Yep, I remember number 36. Yeah,
he would do that duck walk, which made the neck look like it was gonna, like the head, like it was gonna fall off, man.
Yeah.
All right, I've been hogging up the time here. Goes hit him with those hard hitting questions that
Uh-oh.
Well, John, I wanted to ask you about your job. I can't remember a guy who's actually come in to something that has been so traditional. For the longest time, you had Goldie and you had Rogan, and they did their thing. But it's almost like the moment you came in, you've been constantly having to make adjustments, whether it's COVID-19 stuff or just adding in a third person into the booth, but then rotating that third person. I have to imagine it's fun, but it's probably difficult to get that rhythm when guys are being switched in and out. But the one thing that I want to ask you about is throughout this time, you've also had to deal with some of these guys that they've put in. They still fight. Dominic Cruz still fights. Paul Felder still fights. Up until the last fight, Cormier. Tell me about your emotions when you've had to call fights for guys that you've actually worked with, that have been in the booth. What was that like, and how different of a dynamic was it for you?
It's a great question, and I'm glad you're giving it to me now because I finally feel like I have a thesis statement on whether or not I'd prefer to be home watching my dear friends and colleagues or working. I would rather be working, having just gone through the Paul Felder, Rafael dos Anjos experience. And Paul's a dear friend, and there are varying degrees to which I spend time with my broadcast partners on the road. Rogan and I are supremely close, but we don't even stay at the same hotel. Oftentimes he's getting in late. Whereas like Brian Stan would have been the total other end of the spectrum. We spend every waking moment together. And when he fought Vanderlei Silva, we hadn't called fights together. We weren't that close. And I wasn't really a dear friend of his at that time. But watching Paul fight Rafael dos Anjos not working was just not fun at all. I kept wondering why my appetite was so non-existent. And I just was so anxious that whole day. So I think for me, I'd rather be working. I'd rather have Paul Felder be one of 24 or 26 competing athletes. The Cormier-Stipe series was hard, and I do stand by the calls in all three of those fights. But given all that was on the line for Daniel and given where our friendship was at that time in life, that was nerve-wracking for me for sure. But in a long-winded way goes, I'll just say once DC starts making that walk, I'm not even thinking about it. I think it's just the preamble and the lead up and the fighter meetings and everything else that makes it uncomfortable. I just don't like watching my friends fight. And that extends to my broadcast partners, I think, in a much deeper way.
Another wrinkle that I'm going to predict, it may come, I think, this coming year. How about a female analyst in there with you? Laura Sanko. I believe that she's kind of earned maybe a tryout or whatever you want to call it, but she's done it with Invicta. She's great. She does great on the Contender Series. I think that's going to happen. Have you heard anything about that? And have you and Laura ever joked about it or talked about it at all?
She and I have talked about it. I have certainly put her over for other UFC opportunities. And my bosses don't look to me for advice on how to structure the talent, but I think they know that she has a big fan in me, and I certainly would love to see her to my right at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future. I remember Brian Stan, who won a WEC championship, often used to worry that maybe his fight credentials, as silly as this sounds, like wouldn't stack up to maybe Kenny Florian, who had fought for the belt 3 times, or DC, who obviously realized titles in a couple divisions. When Stan had a major title at home, right? So I think for Laura, the only thing working against her would be her limited professional fight experience. But not only has she fought, is she a good analytical mind, but she's comedic, right? I think she brings a lot to the table from a personality standpoint. So I'm all for everybody getting opportunities. Walt Harris is getting an opportunity on the desk this weekend, which I think is overdue. Bilal, remember the name Muhammad, is certainly overdue for an opportunity on the desk, and I could think of countless others as well. But yes, I have 2 daughters and love women and would be all for Laura getting that opportunity. And I don't know if it'll be 2021, but I do think that eventually she's going to get her shot. And what I really have said to her repeatedly, and she'll tell you this, all you need is your shot. I think all she needs is one broadcast with us, and she would have a seat in the future for sure.
Before you came on, we were talking to Mark Ratner, and one thing that came up that actually made me think of you was open scoring. And he was just talking about the dynamics that would change because of that. What about you? Your job would be completely different if you knew exactly what was going on in the scorecards. The way you would have to call the fight, I think would maybe change a little bit. Have you ever thought about that? Is it something that you would ever welcome into the UFC, and how you would call a fight if that came about?
Well, we've thought about it extensively. I mean, Joe Rogan and I both are in favor of open scoring. I do think it would effectively change the sport. And in a general way, you can say that maybe our judges don't have the healthiest appreciation for the grappling game. So I have thought about this dating back to even like when Ryan LaFleur was fighting Damian Maia in a main event, and thinking about Damian Maia and maybe people not appreciating his style at times, and having him look up at the monitor and all of a sudden he needs a finish in a fight that he's dominated. It would effectively change the sport. And I am in favor of it, but not without people coming to the wholesale realization that it effectively changes the sport and how guys would fight and how guys like us would call the fight. And I do think in a given third round, maybe unfortunately, we would be focused less on the technique and less on what was actually going on in the fight, and more so on the ramifications of the losing fighter not being urgent enough, and us maybe not giving enough shine to the winning fighter because the focus is all on the guy who's trying to come back, or the fighter who's got nothing left in the tank is down on the scorecards and does nothing, and he's getting booed out of the arena. So I think for the athletes, there are a lot of inconvenient truths that would come into this. And I don't know how fair it is to the athlete in a lot of respects, but I am all for scoring reform, open scoring, anything that can be done to change our antiquated, ineffective, terrible system.
Man, you brought up something that I always think about. It's the fighters sometimes when they're getting booed as they're walking out, and I can't stand it. It takes balls to be in that cage. And speaking of balls, how about Manscaped? Have you guys tried this lately? George, tell me about Manscaped.
I have those. In my door goes.
The Anik and Florian podcast as well. I think I've seen Manscaped with them as well. So hopefully John can bear with us, because yes, we have a stacked show today with Mark Radner and Jon Anik, and we do have to squeeze in our promotion for a limited time. Subscribers get not 1 but 2 free gifts. The Shed travel bag, we've shown you that many times. That carries all your goods. It's a $39 value. And the patented high-performance anti-shaving Manscaped boxers, which I'm rocking right now. That's why I can't show you beneath this Laker top here that I put on.
No, we believe you. Don't show us.
Okay, yeah. So, no, I have a pair of that. But look, get 20% off free shipping and use the code JunkieNation at manscaped.com. Goes.
Hey, I'm telling you, I'm a firm believer. The ladies, they're all about it. You got to go to Manscaped. Junkie Nation is your code, 20% off, free shipping. Punch in that code, and thank you for bearing with us there, Jon Anik.
Thanks, John, for bearing with me.
Are you kidding me? I'm a radio guy. You can read all the spots you need to.
Hey, John, listen, I don't want to be you and do all this preparation, but only use 30%. So I'm going to hit you with some of these questions here. When you run into fans, what do they want to talk to you about the most?
The 209 tattoo.
Okay.
Well, I think that has evolved over the years, but certainly I've taken probably just as many pictures with my arm as with my face.
Interesting. Okay, and what's a number 2? Because I'm just curious if they want to talk like about your job or what just happened that night. Like, how does that work?
Yes, my job, and most often they're always very gracious and complimentary, and they want to talk about Rogan. I mean, not a week goes by that somebody in my life or not in my life reaches out to me to try to get in contact with Joe. So that is something that has certainly evolved over the last several years. but Joe changes his cell phone number pretty frequently. So best of luck tracking him down.
Also, the COVID scare that you had earlier this summer. What was the initial feeling like early on? I mean, we got to see some of that in the Declassified series that they had, but just tell me, like, is that one of those things where because there's so many unknowns, your life kind of flashes before you for a bit?
That was those were some of the worst hours of my life. You know, Jared Gordon and I were leaning on each other pretty heavily because we both had come from South Florida, both had a negative test in Vegas, both boarded the same charter, and then had a false positive once we landed in Abu Dhabi immediately. We obviously didn't know it was a false positive at the time, so we were both presumptive that we had it and that he wasn't going to be able to fight and that I was not going to be able to call this pay-per-view. And the nature of our pay-per-views is such, and the play-by-play role is such, that it would have been a massive inconvenience for John Gooden to step in and do his first pay-per-view in that climate. So as much as the documentary focused on me potentially being away from my family for 45 days and going down to the 5th floor for a mandatory medical quarantine, yeah, I was thinking about all of that stuff, but it was also a huge show, and I was going to be leaving a lot of people hanging, not being able to perform and sort of honor the contract, you know, to the point I made earlier. So there was just a lot of anxiety for a lot of different reasons. When my boss, Craig Borsari, called me and told me that my follow-up test was negative, I mean, Christmas doesn't even begin to describe it. I was so happy, and then followed it up with a couple more negatives. But yeah, it was not ideal at all. It was very confusing having left Vegas clean and then all of a sudden popping dirty in Abu Dhabi. But all's well that ends well.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and the last one is, what would you rather do? A shoey on, you know, you're talking to Tai Tuivasa. He just won a fight, and he makes you do a shoey. And let's just say that you get the clearance to chug a beer. You know, I'm being silly here.
Yep.
Would you rather do that? Would you rather do the Justin Gaethje backflip? And don't worry, you got a couple spotters. Or when Valentina Shevchenko does her dance, you got to do some break dancing in front of her. Of the three, which one would you rather do?
All right, so we're definitely not doing the backflip, bro. So we can eliminate that right off the bat. I think I would dance because I'm not afraid to embarrass myself on national television, as I have shown multiple times over the years in many different ways. But anyone who listens or watches the Anik and Florian podcast knows that I recently did a shoey. But here's the thing: it was my shoe, and I spit in my own shoe. So it depends on the conditions of the shoey. If you're saying random dude's shoey in a COVID-19 climate with Tai Tuivasa's loogie in it, then I'm dancing with Shevchenko. But if we're controlling some of the variables in the shoey, I have no problem catching a little buzz for the rest of the broadcast and making good on that. So, you know, it just depends how much spit is in the shoe.
Gotcha. All right. Hey, by the way, remember the show, that was your idea, suggested to Bilal and your brother, or did they come from them?
So, yeah, I mean, so Cody Merrow, who is our producer, was hoping for a shoulder program under the Anik and Florian podcast banner. And I came up with Bilal as the guy that I wanted to build it around. And I came up with the name Remember the Show. Conceptually, Bilal deserves a lot of the credit for the game show. But yeah, putting my twin brother in there as Bilal's co-host, that was sort of a thought that I had, and I threw it to Cody, and he loved it. People are kind of freaked out at the fact that there is an identical twin version of me with hair down to his shoulders. So I think it works. But Bilal deserves a lot of the credit because he's the brains behind most of the operation. And I don't know. I think the game show's pretty damn entertaining. We need to have the two of you go head-to-head some week.
Just let us know, man. It definitely looks like they're having a lot of fun, and your brother's as talented as you are. And of course, we know Bilal. I knew exactly when he was going to be a part of a podcast or anything like that he'd be successful because he just oozes personality. And I hope he realizes that and can give him a push. Not only, like you said, like possibly on the desk, but just continue to feature him and have cameras follow him because he's a character. Law degree, too.
He's the man, and he's won 7 of 8, and thankfully there's a number 13 next to his name right now. But man, is it hard, right? Like for Bilal, he's got to win 10 of 11 to maybe get to the top 8, right? And then hopefully you get that big fight short notice or otherwise. It's crazy that as good as he is, right, the night that he lost to Jeff Neal, it makes it very difficult at welterweight. I absolutely love the kid off the octagon, inside it, and yeah, man. we'll all keep pushing his cause, and hopefully he'll get there.
Hey, Jon, I hope you and your family have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for everything you do in our sport. You're an incredible talent. You call the fights, and then you go do the post fights, whether it's in the octagon or, digitally or whatever. You nail the reads. You distribute the ball, whether it's a 2-man show or a 3-man show. You've gotten them to be better as well. So honestly, you're like a John Stockton, and you're creating Karl Malones everywhere, because everyone has up their game, and it's because of you, my man. So keep doing it. Keep doing that great job that you do.
Well, don't lose my number. I appreciate it. I will always take your call, and it's always a treat for me to chop it up with you guys. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours as well. And I'll take that John Stockton love all day, my man. So thank you sincerely for every last word. And we'll see you guys December 5th from that tiny little UFC Apex, I guess.